Asian ytimessä tänään on, että Takanamme on lännessä levitettyjen suurten sotavalheiden vuosikymmen, joka käsittää loputtomasti vääristeltyä tietoa ja propagandaa, jota on levitetty tapahtumista Ukrainassa ja erityisesti täältä entiseltä Ukrainan alueelta, Donbassista. Vain totuudella on kuitenkin merkitystä, koska vain totuus vapauttaa meidät epätietoisuudesta, joka uhkaa johdattaa kansalaiset ympäri Eurooppaa keskelle suursotaa. Meidän on herättävä totuuteen ennen kuin se herättää meidät painajaiseen. Länsimaiden suorittama Ukrainan tukeminen ja aseistaminen mahdollisti verisen sodan jatkamisen Donbassissa yli 8 vuotta ja kuluneet lähes 3 vuotta Ukrainan sisällissotaan intervention tehnyttä Venäjää vastaan. Suomen kaltaiset länsimaat ovat tukeneet ja aseistaneet ylikansallisen agendan mukaan kiihkeästi Ukrainaa, mutta vain ajautuakseen uhkaavan suursodan etulinjaan. Mikä on tärkeintä ymmärtää? Oikeudenmukaista ja ymmärrettävää syytä tai perustetta Suomen tai muidenkaan Pohjoismaiden, Baltian, Saksan tai Euroopan länsimaiden osallisuuteen Kiovan joukkojen hyökkäykseen venäläisiä vastaan ei ole olemassa. Aseistaminen on loputtava ja keskustelujen on alettava, jotta yli vuosikymmenen raivonut verilöyly Ukrainassa, lännen taistelu viimeiseen ukrainalaiseen, saadaan vihdoin päättymään ja samalla Euroopan kohtaama suursodan uhka väistymään. Yhdysvallat, Ukrainan kriisin keittäjä ja konfliktin lietsoja, nauttii vastakkainasettelunsa hedelmiä ja aiheuttaa yhä uusia provokaatioita. Tuottaen mainoskoneistollaan sotateollisuutensa tilauskantaa palvelevia myyttisiä tarinoita kuvitteellisista tapahtumista, joilla länsimaalaiset saadaan kannattamaan asioita, jotka johtavat sotaan. Yhä suurempaan konfliktiin ja Suomen kaltaisille lännen vasalleille yhä vahingollisempaan vastakkainasetteluun Venäjän kanssa. Mitä suurempaa on ollut Ukrainasta tuotettu tavoitteellinen sotapropaganda, sitä suurempia ovat olleet lännen sotateollisuuden tilauskannat, jotka totuuden salanneen propagandan kustantavat. Ensin tulee tieto, sitten toiminta. Donbassista on luotu vuosikymmenen täysin vääristeltyä tietoutta, jota on seurannut täysin väärämielinen toiminta. Lännessä salattu totuus Donbassista on hyvin tiedossamme, jotka emme tulleet tänne Donetskiin, Luganskiin tai muillekaan venäläisen maailman alueille tienaamaan, emmekä rahastamaan mitään kenenkään taskuun. Me olemme tulleet tänne auttamaan, tekemään yhteistyötä ja oppimaan, monet meistä aina siitä lähtien, kun Ukrainan kriisi syttyi. Meitä ulkomaalaisia, varsinkin länsimaalaisia Donbassissa, syytetään usein lännen valtamediassa propagandisteiksi, koska he vertaavat meitä itseensä kuvitellessaan, että kaikki ovat heidän kaltaisiaan. Mutta koska me arvostamme journalismia ja etsimme totuutta yhdessä todellisten sodan uhrien kanssa, meidän ei tarvitse pelätä paikallisia, ei heidän reaktioitaan, koska he tietävät, että me, Donbassin tilanteen kansainväliset tarkkailijat, toimittajat, analyytikot, historioitsijat ja poliitikot, kerromme teille totuuden, josta lännen lietsontaan vihkiytynyt valtamedia vaikenee. Olen Janus Putkonen, suomalainen päätoimittaja, joka on työskennellyt ja asunut Ukrainan sisällissodan keskellä Donbassissa jo vuosikymmenen ajan. Seurassani tänään asian ytimessä on muita kaltaisiani Serbiasta, Italiasta, jotka välittävät maanmiehelleen totuuksia Donetskista ja Luganskista, jotka me tiedostamme ja jaamme miljoonien Donbassin asukkaiden kanssa. Mukana on paikallisia luganskilaisia, koska heitä silmiin katsomalla me emme saattaisi valehdella elämästämme täällä, josta läntinen sotakoneisto on valheensa Venäjää vastaan tuottanut. Tervetuloa asian ytimeen, Luganskin kansantasavallan pääkaupunkiin.
Мы не хотели воевать, мы никого не трогали, мы не бегали ни по каким майданам. И что получили? За что? Мы террористы? Террористы! Да пусть мне про какой город говорят, но про Горловку. Здесь все ребята поднялись.
Песен еще не написаны. Сколько? Скажи, кукушка. Пробой.
Vuonna 2014 Ukrainan laillisen hallituksen kaatamisen jälkeen alkoi hirvittävä kansanmurha Itä-Ukrainassa, joka vaati kansainvälistä yhteisöä reagoimaan yhteisellä humanitaarisella vaatimuksella Save Donbass People. Lännen tukemassa Ukrainan vallankaappauksessa valtaan nostetut venäläisvastaiset Kiovan nationalistit hyökkäsivät raskaasti aseistettuna Donetskiin ja Luganskiin. Kansanäänestyksellä itsenäisyyttä vaatineiden ukrainalais-venäläisten kyliin ja kaupunkeihin, joissa perustetut Donbassin itsepuolustusjoukot ryhtyivät vastarintaan. Syttyi geopoliittinen Ukrainan sisällissota keskelle Eurooppaa, jossa Kiovan joukot tuhosivat kaupunkeja ja tappoivat armotta itä-ukrainalaisia. Länsi antoi tukensa konfliktille ja länsimaat pyrkivät saamaan länsimaalaisten tuen Kiovan joukoille, erityisesti syyttämällä konfliktista Venäjää, valehtelemalla propagandassaan kaiken päälaelleen. Miljoonilta Donbassin asukkailta riistettiin lännen informaatiosodassa äänioikeus ja kansan vastarinnalta peitettiin todelliset kasvot. Kotejaan, maataan ja kulttuuriaan puolustaneet patriotit, tuhannet Donbassin kaivosmiehet, vääristeltiin länsimaalaisille Venäjän salaisena haamuarmeijana ja heidän kasvonsa peitettiin terrorismin maskeihin, kertoen myyttisiä tarinoita Eurooppaa uhkaavista Venäjän pienistä vihreistä miehistä. Kului 8 vaikenemisen ja valheiden sisällissodan vuotta. Donbassin puolustajien raskasta, mutta menestyksekästä torjuntataistelua, jatkuvaa asemasotaa, jonka aikana miljoonien entisten ukrainalaisten ihmis- ja perusoikeudet lakkautettiin. Venäjä vastasi humanitaariseen hätään ja tarjosi poliittista suojelua, kunnes lännen tukema eskalaatio kiristettiin uudestaan huippuunsa ja Donbassista tuli uudestaan laajan geopoliittisen konfliktin etulinja. 16-17 helmikuuta 2022 alkoi Kiovan joukkojen suurhyökkäyksen tulivalmistelut. Minskin tulitaukosopimuksesta tuli kuollut kirjain, kun Ukrainan tykistä tuli ja hyökkäykset alkoivat koko rintaman pituudelta. Viikkoa myöhemmin Venäjä suoritti sotilaallisen intervention pysäyttääkseen suurhyökkäyksen ja lunastaakseen lupauksensa, ettei vuoden 2014 kansanmurhaa enää sallita toistuvan uudestaan. Donbassin kansa pelastettiin. Länsi käänsi propagandassaan jälleen kaiken päälailleen ja leimasi Venäjän syylliseksi kuuluttamansa provosoimattoman hyökkäykseen Ukrainaan. Tällä räikeällä valheella ei ainoastaan käydä armotonta taistelua viimeiseen ukrainalaiseen Venäjän heikentämiseksi, mutta Donbassin sodasta luoduilla myyteillä, totaalisen informaatiosodan propagandalla koko Eurooppaa lietsotaan sotaan Venäjää vastaan. Lännen sotapropaganda, vuosikymmenen ajan lietsotut valheet Donbassista vääristävät historian ja todellisuuden, nostattavat perusteetonta vihaa Venäjää ja venäläisiä vastaan, vaatien kansainvälistä yhteisöä reagoimaan maailmanrauhan puolustamisen nimessä. Totuus Donbassista.
So, that was the leading introduction to the topic of today's discussion. First, I want to make a question to all of our guests. So, Finland was dragged directly after Russian intervention to the civil war in Ukraine to NATO in 2022, fueled with huge amount of propaganda from claimed and accused, fabricated stories and events from Donbass, while hiding the real situation on the ground. Now, while arming people and forming NATO bases against Russia, the people in the West believes a lot but knows a little. From what really has happened in Ukraine and its former regions and actions of Russians. As it said, the first victim of the war is always the truth. In your opinion, what is the greatest lie and propaganda that has been spread about Donbass by the Western media over the past 10 years? Please, Vincent.
Thank you. It's really complicated to be able to choose just one fake news among the many that Western press has told from February 2022 until today, but from 2014 until today. The amount of lies is enormous, but I would like say that it would be appropriate to go in chronological order, only 2 or 3 lies, of course. The first lie concerned the fact that according to the Western propaganda in 2014, there was no will to change the Ukrainian government through violence, but rather it was a spontaneous protest. Right now, I'm bringing to Italy the Russia Today documentary, Maidan Road to the War, completely translated dubbed in Italian. They are trying in every way to block and censor it. It has already happened with Donbass yesterday, today, and tomorrow, another documentary film. Even the Vice President of the European Parliament has moved in an attempt to put pressure on the managers of cinemas and theaters by threatening them with retaliation if they agree to the screening of the documentaries. The reason is simple. The false news that Maidan was not a protest to change the Ukrainian government in a violent way is contrary, and it is contrary in the easiest way. The participants of Maidan themselves admit that their goal was the overthrow of the Yanukovych government and the military fighting against Russia. But the amount of false news is enormous. One of the saddest is that for the Italian press, there is no problem of Nazis in Ukraine. They hide the fact that the opposition parties have been erased, that Stefan Bandera is glorified, that Azov, Aidar, Tornado battalions are composed of Nazi extremists. In fact, we want to see in a certain way that the problem does not exist because being a Nazi in Ukraine is not a problem, rather is a reason to boast. There are so many fake news, some of them very funny, like the news that the Russians have run out of the weapons and are fighting with shovels. But these two summarize well the situation of the mainstream, that is waging a war of false information. So I think that we must to bring the truth in Western opinion. This is very difficult to make, but it's important because this fake news, the people know that this fake news is very, very impossible to is true because it's a very, very incredible.
Thank you. And then Miodrag Sargovic, Serbian journalist.
Hello, and thanks for the invitation. The introduction we just saw, in the introduction, the footage that we saw was largely made by Max Fadeev. Max Fadeev is a guy from Donetsk who, before this war, he never actually held a camera or worked as a journalist or operator, and he made that footage in 2014 and 15. It's first-class footage. It is a footage that an average Western operator or camera guy would kill for, but not die for. Max only improved over time. In March 22, Max spent 4 weeks with special operations units that were storming Mariupol. He actually went in the middle of the action with them, once again risking his life. Actually, he's very good at risking his life. When we cooperated on something in 2017, he got wounded on the practice, you know. So he's actually very, very good at risking his life. About Mariupol, he made a documentary. I don't know how to translate it in English. Ukraja bez dni.
On the edge of the abyss.
On the edge of the abyss. It is. I, as a human being and as a career journalist, I'm totally convinced that is quite possibly the best documentary about war that I ever have the, can't say pleasure, but that I ever saw. There is no such film about Vietnam War. There is no such film about Korean War. There is no such film about Iraqi War or Afghanistan War or any of the Western wars, because not a single journalist from those countries ever took nearly the risk Max Fadeev agreed to take in order to deliver the truth. And that is why actually he became the truth. What he presented to the viewers is something that by now they all probably know already and don't care. Sadly, the Western audience mainly doesn't care about the truth, but they should care about Max Fadeev. They should be ashamed, our colleagues from the West should be ashamed that I'll repeat, not a single journalist from any Western media ever took nearly the amount of risk Max Fadeev took to deliver the truth. That is journalistic heroism of the highest order. I am humbled by being able to say that I know him, that I'm acquainted with him, and that I was small part of the entire army, let's say, of Russian journalists and Donbass journalists like Max Fadeev, who actually are leading who are preserving, who are creating the documents for future generations. In 20 years, in 100 years, in 200 years, whoever would want to find out what happened in Donbass, he will look at Max Fadeev and not at New York Times or Kiev Times or even China Daily or whatever.
Thank you. Then our honorary professor, Vladimir Sheluto from Lugansk University. Please.
Значит, прежде всего я хочу сказать, что когда речь зашла об освещении событий,
First of all, I'd like to say that when we're talking about covering the events of the Kyiv Maidan by the foreign press, it should be noted that the coverage of those events was quite one-sided. They told only about the support of Maidan. They claimed that historical truth was on the Maidan side. Progress was on the Maidan side. The future was created by those forces. As for the rest, they were taken as a reaction mass. People who were brainwashed by the Russian or mainly Soviet propaganda. This kind of situation usually plays a bad trick with the countries where it happens. Because when there is a revolution or a coup, there are particular political consequences. Usually, as political consequences of such phenomena, so a civil war or a long turmoil. Moreover, so, taking into account that Ukraine as a state was created relatively not long ago, and peace was quite fragile, but it was there. The first hit came with the revolution of 2004, and the second hit came with the revolution of dignity, as they describe it in Ukrainian mass media. But not every, even a big state, with a stable inner order, can stand such strong inner hits. As a result of such devastating hits, in fact, the constitutional system of Ukraine collapsed. Particular groups appeared, which were actually not even provided for by the constitution. For example, paramilitary structures of Maidan. Accordingly, if they appear in one place, they also appear in another, as a response to the existing challenge. So, avoiding the principle of listening to both sides, which is a well-known principle, audiatur et altera pars, means violating this principle, which happened, in fact. That served as a reason for misconception of the events and further escalation of the conflict. First, there came ATO, then JFO, then SMO. And these all are the periods of those events which go in their own patterns.
Потом СВО, и это все, так сказать, является как бы периодами вот тех событий, которые они уже исходят, в общем-то, сами по определенной закономерности.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Professor. Let's go to the second question. The Western population is being fed with Russophobic propaganda, demonization of Russian leadership, and never-ending, breathtaking stories how brutal Russian armed forces are cruel and aggressive occupiers of the poor Ukrainian people. Rhetoric is based on the belief that Russia brings chaos and death wherever it goes and whatever it does. By leadership of European Union and NATO, Finns have been told by the Finnish mainstream media and globalist politicians that after destroying Donbass, Russia will come and destroy them. We very well remember after Ukraine started full-scale offensive against DPR and LPR on February 16 to 17, 2022, the nature of the Ukrainian civil war in Donbass changed dramatically. On February 24th, Russia came to help our people's militia and intervention started. But what did Russian special military operation really cause? And what does it mean for the millions of Donbass people? Please, Miodrag.
I'm going to tie this to the previous question. Possibly the biggest lie about this war is that Russian operation was unprovoked. It was provoked on every and any level ever since 2013, actually. The West is provoking Russia all the time for one simple reason, because they cannot attack Russia. They are too afraid to do to Russia what they did to Serbia or Libya or Ukraine, actually. So they're provoking and provoking and provoking and provoking, and finally they provoked Russia in February of 2022. As Russia keeps saying, this war is not against Ukraine, but against the collective West, even though the collective West is still didn't send troops, officially at least, on the field of battle, but they are participants in the war. It is the war for global conscience. If we allow legal governments to be toppled in a violent coup by Victoria Nuland, then there can be no world order whatsoever other than the one that is dictated by Victoria Nuland. This is a war this is the freedom fight against the imperialism, fascism, Nazism of Victoria Nuland and her bosses. And that is the real cause. I guess that many Russians would probably phrase it much different than I am. And there, of course, that in the middle of everything is the basic will and human rights and basic humanity of Donbass people, because their no to the Victoria Nuland's world order is what started this. Their will has to be protected. Hopefully, luckily now it's much more protected than in 2014. And I can only hope, as somebody who visited Donbass many times, I can only hope that their will and their way of life will be protected ever since.
Thank you. And Mr. Shalut.
Значит, мне хочется сказать о таком важной исторической закономерности.
I'd like to speak about an important historical rule. The system of international relation is not created. There is a strong factor of various accidents, and there is a strong factor of social conflict, as there are no deterring forces. So when we are speaking about the launch of the Russian special operation, we should bear in mind that it was preceded by pretty long negotiations on the creation of the collective security system on the European continent. In fact, they ended in a breakdown. We remember very well what happened after breakdowns of collective security before the World War II. But this is a rule. It provokes the creation of separate agreements, which eventually leads to multiplying the conflict. moreover so as the conflict already existed. And here I see another historical rule. Inner conflict can grow to the external one, the same way as the external conflict can become more and more inner, depending on different stages of historical development.
And
Thank you.
Vincent.
Often in the West, and in Italy in particular, the mainstream talk about Russian aggression against Ukraine, completely forgetting 80 years of crimes committed by the Ukrainian governments. If the Russian Federation had not intervened with the special military operation, probably in Donbass we would have witnessed the same situation that is happening in Gaza now. Besides, what I would like to ask to the supporters of sending weapons to the Kiev government, what is your goal? To ensure that Donbass return under the government of Kiev? And what will happen to the population that lives here? Why don't they come here to Donbass and ask the population directly, the two people directly, what they think of the special military operation? And above, or don't ask the population, the people of Donbass, how they felt for 8 long years when no spoke of this war. No one spoke of Ukrainian aggression. No one spoke of indiscriminate bombing of civilians in peaceful cities like Lugansk or Donetsk. They are Russian. They have chosen not to be a part of Ukraine anymore. Never again. European governments must accept the choice of a people who are fighting for their culture, their tradition, their values and their land. This is the land of Donbass, and not a single inch of this land will be part of two criminal and terrorist organizations called European Union and NATO. This is stuff of the people of Donbass. This is stuff of this also mine. We must bring the voice of these people to the West, so that the European peoples who don't want war really know who is the real aggressor and who is the victim.
Thank you. We all here has been following closely events for years. I think with the Mildred we were all, 2015 we met each other in Donetsk.
16 actually,
Yeah.
I can never forget.
Yeah.
You know. I made it tattoo, I met Janus in 20.
Almost a decade. And Vincento also past years has been closely living here in Lugansk. So I'm very glad to hear your opinion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Professor. I asked Finnish journalists and politicians, and there is 3 people. One is they're all patriots. They're from Finland. They are seeking the truth with us. And I asked them to make video questions and their statements from the situation right now in Finland. And there are Julius Kivi, who is a broadcaster, and also a very famous musician, Pauli Krattiko, he's a professor, and then Olli Kocher, who is a politician and analyst. And let's take a first video statement and question from Julius Kivi. Let's see.
Hello, my name is Julius Kivi. I have a podcast show on YouTube on which I address geopolitical issues. In Finland, the dominant narrative frames the events as part of Russian aggression, often ignoring the voices and experiences of the people in Donbass. As someone who values truth and transparency, I believe it is crucial to uncover and share the realities of the situation with a wider audience. So my question is, how has the international narrative about the Donbass conflict shaped public opinion in Western countries, particularly in Finland? What can be done to counter the perceived misinformation and present the realities of the situation to a wider audience? Thank you. And present the realities of the situation to a wider audience. Thank you.
Okay.
So, can we get an answer, Mr. Murdoch?
Well, I think that few more Oreshnikovs would give a probably better answer than myself. You know. How was the international altar shaped? It is shaped by fear. I think that's the truth about the Western societies for more than a century. When they are not afraid, then they ask for blood. Then they enjoy watching people of Donetsk or Lugansk or Gorlovka being massacred, or people in Odessa being burnt alive. But when they realize that Russians have some bomb called some missile called Oreshnik, then suddenly they extend their peace and love to Russia, and they say, "I'm sorry," and they say, "We have nothing to do with Biden administration." You know, they are suddenly afraid, and it is a society. Maria Zakharova, actually the spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in last year's interview to one of the American journalists, said that while she was living in America, when she was in the UN mission, Russian mission in the UN, she was shocked how scared Americans are in their everyday lives. I can share the same feeling. A couple of times I've been to America and I witnessed it myself. You know, they are literally scared for their house, for their job. They're scared of their boss or whoever. And that translates very well to media narratives. So it is shaped by fear. When in 2014 they heard that some part of something called Ukraine was rebelling against the central power of that Ukraine, they were actually glad to witness the massacres, to witness the violence. But as soon as they realized that violence could turn on them in the name of Oreshnik, then they started singing other notes. I think that it's not my position to advise Russia on anything or Russians, but I just think that Russians would be well advised to keep in mind that Russian tolerance is often confused for weakness in the West precisely because of their fear-shaped mindset.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And the second video comes from docent Professor Pauli Prattiko.
Janus asked me to provide a brief commentary for this event and then leave you with a couple of questions for the participants to discuss. So that's what I'm going to do in this very short video. If we go back in history, it's clear that all the world wars have been different from each other. So you can't take from one template what happened in the First World War and then applied those same things to the Second World War. They have all been different disasters. And this also applies, I think, to the Third World War that is now ongoing and unfolding. And is actually reaching its climate now that NATO is finally openly attacking, threatening to attack even more the opposite side. So we are now talking about firing missiles, NATO missiles into Russia. We are talking about doing a preemptive strike against Russia, and we are already talking about using nuclear weapons in this war. So we are clearly coming, the conflict is coming global, and it's coming more explicit every day. So that's the reality. But what is unknown, at least to me, is how this third disaster will unfold. Because definitely it's not going to unfold in the same way as the Second World War or the First World War, if only for the reason that now we have nuclear weapons. It changes the conflict in its entirety. And then also it's clear that the missile technology plays a much more important role today than in the past. And now if I go back in time to the Second World War, where Finland played a major role simply because it was a proximal country to the opposite, to the Soviet Union. And in those times, this type of proximity was important because the conflict was settled by regular armies, which always implies logistics. And it's clear why Finland, in those circumstances, ended up into the eye of the hurricane. But my question now is that being faced with a conflict, a global World War III, with so different parameters and so different starting assumptions, different weapon systems, where perhaps the proximity doesn't play a huge role. The nuclear weapons and missile technology doesn't care so much about that. And also, I feel that the importance of regular armies is much, much smaller here because they can be simply wiped out by powerful missile technologies. So the question is here that is in my mind is that when this conflict now unfolds, first, how will it unfold? What type of physical violent conflict we are going to see? Are we going to see that? And secondly, is Finland playing an important role, or is it going to be largely irrelevant? And the reason I'm asking this is because I feel that if it's irrelevant, then it has still some prospects of being saved. But if there is some reason that it still would play an important role, let's say because it's part of NATO or whatever it might be, then I'm afraid that the situation is going to be very bad.
So, Mr. Professor.
First of all, I want to say that there are very big difficulties in terms of resolving such conflicts at the present time. The first, of course, is the degradation of international organizations in many respects, and international law in general as such. Because there is simply no other way to resolve a conflict than through legal means, the negotiation process. On the other hand, is there a will for the negotiation process at the present time? The fact is that relations between countries are very seriously chaotic, since many international treaties that were concluded a long time ago are practically completely inoperative. And unfortunately, such countries that have always played a major role in improving international relations are now acting as biased countries, as evidenced by the entry of Finland and Sweden in NATO. Therefore, in the most difficult times, it was precisely the participation of these countries, neutral countries I mean, that played a very big role in preventing conflicts. Another difficult point is that I want to emphasize, is there a possibility of emerging several conflicts at the present time? And this is a pattern. As soon as the conflict on the territory of Ukraine began, there was immediately a parallel conflict in the Middle East. Now I see the same thing. A conflict here and a conflict in the Middle East. This is also a very dangerous tendency, because such moments arise when two such poles are actually created, on which very dangerous tendencies arise. Therefore, modern politicians must demonstrate serious abilities to resolve such complex conflicts. Of course, here there is such an option as freezing the conflict. But we understand perfectly well that frozen conflicts, so to speak, are very dangerous, because they need to be frozen very well, so that they do not open up again. At one time, attempts were made to freeze these conflicts through the Minsk agreements, but, as history shows, they failed. There were many plans, but none of them were implemented.
Было много планов, но ни один из планов не был реализован.
And then we will have the third video participation to this program today. And we have a politology and politician Olli Kottila.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. If you look at the mainstream media in Finland, if you read newspapers, watch TV, listen to radio, they talk a lot about war, preparing for war, war preparedness, and possible war scenarios. Many so-called experts are all the time talking about war. It's very strange because when Finland joined NATO, we were told that NATO would provide us with more security and stability. It seems to be the opposite. On the contrary, would someone say. Finland is in a very difficult geopolitical situation because it's in between East and West. Finland was a long time very careful and did not try to participate into world politics. In my opinion, Finland has lost this role and trying to participate in world politics even though it has no resources for it. Finland is obliged to invest more and more into defense. That's what they are saying. 3% of the GDP. That would mean billions. Of course, this is a very heavy burden for the Finnish taxpayers. However, I think that it's quite possible that the politics in Central Europe might change, meaning that there might be some major changes in France and Germany, maybe within 2 years. Finland has closed many doors and has not been very actively trying to construct bridges and relations to different directions. Finnish politics is very EU and NATO focused. My question is that if there is a major political change in Europe, how will Finland adapt to this new situation? Thank you.
So, can you please comment on the...
Of course, I explained the situation in Italy. In Italy, we have a government that supports Ukraine, send weapons. The problem, we don't have opposition parties in Italy, that the opposition parties and the government are the same. They accept the orders of their masters, USA and NATO. In Italy there is a great difference about the political situation, the government and the parliament, and how feel the Italian people. The Italian people understand that the Italian parliament, with their decision in Italy to fight, bring the Italy to fight the against the Russian Federation. But the Italian people is not against Russia. They don't support Russophobic political. And they show their opinion with a lot of things. For example, there are a lot of billboards in many cities with the message, Russia is not my enemy. For example, a lot of people participated at the screening of documentary film or about Donbass, or meeting, convention, conference about Donbass. And the measure of city tried to block this conference, but the Italian people tried to find another place because they want to talk about, to stop this war. I hope that the Italian government and the opposition will understand that the Italian people don't want to support the war against Russia. I hope, but I'm not, if this is possible.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Also to the end, I want to give you a possibility to have a free word about this event and your thoughts, and for the international audience. Let's start shortly, briefly, closing words. Mr. Professor.
Мы поблагодарим организаторам медиаконференции,
Would like to greet the organizers of this media conference.
Поскольку такое обсуждение столь сложных вопросов, оно является очень полезно,
Because it's very useful to discuss such
имеет
difficult
глубокий
questions,
смысл
issues, and it has deep meaning.
и в любой ситуации должно продолжаться.
And
Потому что
in any
это
situation, you have to
дает
keep
возможность
going to doing this.
взаимопонимания, а значит и доверия.
Because this gives a chance for mutual understanding and thus trust.
Thank you. Vincenzo.
Thank you for this the participation of this meeting. Thank you for the media conference and for to hear the situation, the question about the situation in Finland. Unfortunately, Finland and Italy is in the same situation, but I think that in Finland more hard because we in Finland chose to enter in NATO very in this year. In Italy, this is not our decision, because when the Italy lose the war, must accept this. And so in Finland it's very strange. This is my question: why Finland choose to suicide? This is really terms. Why this political choose this?
Thank you. And our friend from Serbia.
I already thank you for the invitation at the beginning, so I will use this time to ask a question for the NATO countries. I keep hearing them saying, like, why does Russia even care if Ukraine is in the NATO? Like, NATO is already on Russia's border, so what's the matter with Ukraine? You know? Let me put it like this. It took Russia almost 3 years to fire Oreshnik at Ukraine. And when they eventually did fire it, it was without charge whatsoever. It didn't have any nuclear or any other ammunition at all. I really don't think that Russia would wait for 3 years to fire Oreshnik on any NATO country that would be stupid enough to attack it. So instead of asking Russia, why do you care about Ukraine, maybe you should answer to yourself, maybe you should ask yourself, what the hell are you doing in the alliance that was specifically created to provoke Russia? Thank you very much.